Okay, if everything's going according to Hoyle, I should be coming to you live from Studio B. Drove up last night, that's why I didn't stream. Yesterday afternoon, I could have streamed in the night. For some reason, every time when I come up, man, I don't know if it's the drive necessarily that takes it out of me, but I don't think it is the drive. I don't know. I drove, got a few supplies. I'm only staying for the day, aka today, and then I going back tomorrow. But yeah, I don't know. I had the best of intentions, and then I left those intentions behind. This is what is this? Mandarin orange seltzer from the grocery store, local grocery store for the working man. No Spindrift today. I've got a Ouija open. You may or may not notice. Over the weekend, and I posted some pictures. I didn't do this on stream. I just kind of wanted to go through just for fun, but I also was doing it mostly non-digitally, aka actually drawing things out. Though the hex map I ended up drawing on my tablet in Procreate on my iPad. Or actually, I should say, I drew the template by hand on regular paper. Then I took a picture of it. I scanned it by taking a picture on my phone, dropped that into Procreate, and then drew over it for this template. I then, using the stuff I already have done, the Joy of Hex Maps methodology. I rolled. Well, what did I do? So I rolled first for kind of to get a region. I rolled desert. Then I used the desert table to roll and use the sort of our Tetrisy method and got this mixture of grass. Let's see what I got. Grass. There's some these were water hexes that I rolled up, and then I just kind of mixed the terrain from either sides. Got some hills, some kind of broken lands, bad lands, whatever in there, some more hills, and then desert. I then used the point buying method, which we've also been working on, or not so much the point buying method, yes, but haven't gotten that far yet. The point I'm at or had gotten to was rolled for the number of sites and habitations. And I just put them using, really, again, this is super simple. Stars for the sites and filled circles for the habitations. So I got I forget how many I got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 habitations, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sites. And the locations are completely random. So you end up with these groupings. And this is, I guess, partly what I started kind of getting interested in. It's not the right word. That I guess was intriguing. That was I was finding interesting was you look at these kind of groupings that you get. And the one that sort of got me was this. So, I have this river coming through, ends in this lake. And then we have 4 sites right here. And we have some habitations too, but I think I'm going to keep them separate. So we have these 4 sites, and then I kind of included this one up here because it's also on the river. So I was looking at, you have this collection here, and then you have one down here. And I think this speaks to something. I'll probably try to write something in the actual booklet, in the actual documentation, in the zine about. But it's this looking at these groupings and then using them to jumpstart your process, or to be a helper in your process, or to look at it and say, okay, it's not just that there's 4 independent things. I mean, it could be. You could look at it and say, oh, look, I've got one in the Badlands. That's probably separate from these ones in the Grasslands. That's separate from this one in the lake. That would absolutely be valid. You might look at it and say, oh, there are these 2 in the Grasslands. They must be connected, and the other 2 are independent. So then, I'm looking at it like they're all connected. But I think looking at those groupings and just using it to jumpstart your information, your creativity, your process of saying, okay, well, we have this pattern. How can we use this pattern to our advantage creatively? And does it lead to interesting places? So in my case, I looked at those 5 using the river. Using these 5 and then saying, okay, how do these, what might connect? How do we get these together? And like I said, it's going to be pretty, personal. It's going to be up to you how you do it. So I isolated. So what I did is I had this map, right? I put all these things on here, and okay, and then I was breaking them down. Oh, and I did do some more detail, which I only have in this because I was doing stuff by hand. I brought up this little loose leaf sheet of paper here with me, and I basically isolated these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 spots. So I'd gone through and I rolled up. I have a bigger list, which actually is not here, so I can't even show the bigger list because that's back home, Studio A. But behind a list of what types there. I went through and I rolled all the dice, and then I looked at it and I said, well, I want to look at these 5 as kind of a single collection, or at least related collection. So I separated them out onto that second sheet of paper, so I could just kind of concentrate on them and kind of put them next to each other and see what we got. So what we have is, and I guess I should probably have, whoops, no, I didn't want to do that. I should probably put these around differently. So the first one I came up with was the Gloomwater, which is this one here. And I put it in a ravine, so I'll have to update my map to show that these are sort of somewhat hard borders going down. And I decided to make this a ravine. I'm now thinking, because of the alliteration, that maybe Gloomwater Gorge, which I think is what I ended up calling. Yeah, I called the whole thing now because I thought, oh, there's some alliteration that I am missing out on. So it's probably going to be called Gloomwater Gorge. In any case, so 4.4 Gloomwater at the head of a steep ravine, and I'll change that to a gorge. And I actually looked at it, what you call kind of an end of the ravine, and they call it a head, so that's what I call it. At the end of a steep ravine, a lake of dark water broods, fed from several spindly waterfalls that drip down the side slopes and spray a mist that hangs in the still air. The center of the lake is obscured by a thick fog. A dark ribbon of water snakes away from the lake down the ravine. Moonlight's shine shows the translucent forms of the dead. Actually, I thought I didn't. Where did I update it? But I didn't do it here. I was going to change it. Moonlight's shine shows the. I had some more alliteration going on. In any case, moonlight's shine shows the translucent forms of the dead. They approach the lake, stooping at the shore to drink before wading into the waters and vanishing below the surface. So it's just kind of a cool. I think it's cool. I was thinking, I have all these ideas of what the center of the lake has that I don't have written here. The idea that it's obscured by fog. To me, I had this idea that maybe it's a gateway to an underworld, if you have one in your campaign, of sort of a land of the dead. And so it draws dead maybe from this, it's interesting. I was thinking about, maybe there's not one entrance to the dead. Maybe there's multiple places where if you're dead within a certain radius of, you're attracted there. So maybe this is one of these spots. Not all the dead in the world coming here, but maybe the dead from a certain area coming here. In any case, the dead during I imagine though, I think I would probably just leave it up to if someone were running this down the line, that they could make their own choice. But I imagine the dead are there all the time doing this. You just only see them. They only kind of become visible in a way in moonlight. And they approach the lake, they drink from it, and then they wade in the waters and kind of vanish below the surface. They're going down to the underworld. And I had some ideas about whether if you went to the center of, if you went into the fog, that you would end up in the other underworld. I had ideas. I've thought about, well, what happens if a living person drinks from the lake? I think that might be interesting. What happens there? Is it do they start to die, or like what happens? Like, I don't know. And I don't know if, I will probably put this out at some point in some form and let other folks, if they want to, if they find this worthy to run something in, to run it. But I don't know. Maybe I'll leave it blank. Maybe if I come up with something that I really think is cool, hopefully other folks will think it's cool. But that I have there. So you have this, and my original prompts, I guess, for the lake are barrier, life, and terror. I haven't gotten the terror. I don't know if I've gotten the terror down there right, but I was thinking about different things that can happen if you're living and you step in the water, or if you drink the water, or if you go into the fog. So there's definitely some aspects we can bring more of a terrible sort of thing in there, but also the fact that it's a natural thing. So I like the lake as being kind of natural. It is aligned towards chaos if we want to keep that. And remember, all this stuff you're doing, it's to the extent that it helps you and gives you ideas, it's good. Obviously, ditch it at the first sign that it's not helping you, or that you have a better idea. You're not meant to get, never feel constrained by these things unless you think that constraint helps you. As soon as you find it not helpful, then ditch it. So that's the Gloomwater. Location 2, the second location, is called the Forge of Shadows, which is here in these Badlands. And this one is, I'll just read it. An artificial mound covered in thick grass. On one slope, overgrown but still slightly visible, are 2 rusted iron doors. The doors open into a domed chamber of carved stone blocks. In the center of the chamber is a deep shaft of mason stone, accessible only by well-worn handholds that drills down into the earth. At the bottom of the shaft is a small complex that terminates in a natural cave that faces the Gloomwater from the southeast side, aka this area here. A forge, anvil, and altar are here. A shadow blade can be made here by ritually forging the weapon during a full moon and quenching it in the Gloomwater. I don't know why I put that in parentheses. Okay, so we have the Gloomwater. Now we have some area, something here, and I'm leaving this open in a sense. If I wanted to put in a little dungeon, I could sort of complex, something that will end up leading down here. And it was, and I was thinking maybe that there was a burial here, some kind of sarcophagus that actually hides the entrance down. I'm not sure if I'll keep that or not, but that was some idea that occurred to me. The prompts for this one was it Badlands lore, industry, terror again. I have to figure out how to get more terror. And this one's artificial. It's also chaos. It's chaos aligned, if it matters. So the industry being the making, that's why it's, I feel like having it thematically around, like, what was this thing used for? What was it built? It was built to make a shadow blade. And I don't know what a shadow blade is yet. Haven't gotten that far. I was going to do a gloom blade, but I think gloom blade, I did a Google search and gloom blade was giving me results, and just makes, it would have made a lot of sense since I had the Gloomwater to have, you can make a gloom blade, but it's that seems like it's established enough that it'll have its own expectations if I were to use gloom blade. So I'll go with shadow blade, which may also have expectations. I didn't search it up. I might even have to come up with something else. I don't know. We'll sticking with this right now. In any event, you could make one here if you, and I say ritually, right? So it's not just that, okay, you bring your whatever down here, and I don't even know, there are definitely some questions here. I don't know how much I want to dig into it about, well, you need to get the fires lit. How do you do that? Where's the fire? It probably is that you have to do, there's some, I'm sure there's going to be some special things that you would need. It's not just, okay, well, we throw a bunch of firewood down that shaft and then go down there, light her up, and then start pumping out shadow blades. Like, yeah, that works. Like, no, there's like I put ritually in there. I tried to throw that in there. Say, hey, no, you got to know how to do it, and you got to do it during a full moon, and you have to quench it in the Gloomwater, and then you'll have the shadow blade. What the shadow blade does, I don't know, but I thought it was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Or I thought it was kind of cool, and it's something. It makes it potentially a place that, depending upon the party. Now, shadow blades are going to be magic weapons. Like, I like alignments for things like that. Assuming you're using alignments, so that would be kind of a chaotic weapon. So, not for the lawful people. I would probably that would mean for me anyway that it becomes kind of flavored a little bit. It's a little bit evil, a little bit not nice. Brian says it's evoking a kind of undead lady of the lake holding up a blade to be claimed at your peril. Oh, well, I didn't even think about having someone in the lake doing that. It seems like there's ripe to have something in the lake. Indeed. And maybe it is that quenching of it, something grabs it, pulls it under, and then brings it back. I like that. I'll have to recall that. So that's another, that's another piece of this puzzle, right? So, okay, so now we're going on. What I hadn't gotten around, or I had written a little bit, but I don't think I brought it with me. I think I failed to bring it with me, so I'll have to kind of start over a little bit. Was this at 5-4? I think I'm thinking the notes, if I'm remembering my notes, it was, well, hold on a minute. Let me, I'll just put that in there to hold for a second. So my notes for 5-4 in terms of the prompts are power, death, admiration, artificial. And this one's lawful. So power, it's kind of like you're interfacing with, like it's about power. Either magical power, could be sort of a infernal power, could be divine power, whatever. It's you are interfacing with these kind of primal, some kind of energy or force that you're trying to then get to yourself, right? And this one, so we have that along with death, which makes sense because we're in. I mean, this is where I always kind of think about how the dice sometimes kind of give you these things, right? So we got, for the lake, we got life, but it's a barrier to life. So the dead hanging out, but like it's this. And I think having the fog or something be something like, no, like living things can't really go in there, I think works. And then you have here, right here next to it, is we have something that has to do with power, but also death. So we have a barrier against life here. We have a thing of power of death over here, and then we have this is kind of lore and industry and terror again. And then what is this one, just to round it out? This one is also death. It's neutral. So there's something here. It's natural. Lore. So it's something maybe informational, death and fear, but it's natural. And then this one up here is mysticism. So we're definitely talking about interfacing with the gods and whatnot. The theme is grief, and it's some kind of resource. Hey, Vinny. Brian says this one sounds like a monument. Could be, yeah. So I was going. So we have power, death, admiration, right? So the admiration, yeah, sounds like some kind of monument. It's artificial, so it's maybe something that was built and doing something, yeah. And then of course, like I said at the front is, so what I said at the front, since nobody was here to listen to me, I think nobody had joined yet. This kind of started for me, right? Starting here, rolling this out, which I did by hand, just manually over the weekend. It was fun. And then finding these patterns and then thinking, well, what can I do with these patterns? And I like this pattern here, like a little, almost the Big Dipper or Little Dipper. Got these three hanging. And like I said, I could have included these two. I could have split this up in different ways. I could have had these as one and these two as one, and then this by itself. There's many ways you could do it. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. It's just what appeals to you. But I think whatever patterns you look at, use those patterns to your advantage, because it just helps, right? By setting this one up, it gave me, by figuring out what this one is and then deciding that these are related, it gave me ideas for these two, which made, just in terms of process, it made coming up with these two ideas a lot easier than if I had tried to think of each one isolated. And I could change my mind. It could turn out that maybe I'd come to this one, I go, I don't know, I'm not feeling it anymore, so okay, it can be something else. Or this one, maybe so, you know what, I don't, let's move that one somewhere else. It's far enough away, or blah blah blah. Like there's no one way to do it, right? It's just what works. But I think just in general, when you're generating your hex map and you're populating, you're putting stuff in it, look at those patterns and see if those patterns speak to you in some way, and then leverage that to help with this other stuff. So yeah, so maybe some kind of monument, maybe a goddess of death. I don't know. Monument to, I don't know. This is just what's speaking to me right now. Monument to the quiet death. And I mean quiet, not that you can't hear them, because hopefully you can't hear them, but that they're not agitated, not disturbed. I have this idea that the lake actually used to be okay and something happened to it. That maybe it was, maybe there's the sort of the water of the underworld bubbles up here, and that fills this up. And it used to be, I was having this idea, and that it used to be enclosed, and that long ago something broke, and that's why you have river drains out. Maybe there was a cataclysm that created this gorge, and that just messed all kinds of things up. And that stuff is fun. I don't know if I'll end up sticking with that, or even if I would write it down. It's fun, it's those kind of things. I think it's that kind of world building that's fun for me in this case as the world builder. It's fun. Like, oh yeah, this is cool, but it's not really gameable. At a certain point, there's not anything for the party to, if you think about, well, when your party's loose in here, or what can they possibly discover and what can they do with it? And I could write up all kinds of stuff about, and in ancient days, these gods were fighting and they broke the land. And so this thing was here, and then it got dropped into this gorge, and it was the land was broken. And so this thing that maybe once was some kind of fountain or font or spring is now this dark pool. And through all of that, horrible things happen, and therefore what's happening, right? And that's great. And I think as to the extent that it informs other things, it's very cool. The problem, if there is a problem at all, becomes that information in itself. You could write pages and pages and pages about it. Isn't actually useful to anybody if it doesn't explain why something's happening now. If it doesn't inform, like, are these gods that were fighting then, are they back? Is something happening now? Like, how does this stuff enter into now? So I could write all that stuff down, and maybe I will, just to kind of do it. And then maybe if I could distill it down to a little paragraph, it might be fun as a GM, for a fellow GM to read, like, ooh, that's kind of cool. But if it doesn't affect whatever the now is, whatever this is, like, because we're hex mail stuff is like, what's it like? This is a snapshot of this area in this world now. And if it doesn't really inform the now, then Brian says, to me, all this unusable stuff is the top of the funnel. You squeeze it all down into like an item or something. Yeah, you could squeeze it into an item. You could put it as if there was carvings on walls. You could, but even then, I think that you don't want to muddy the waters too much, because you want people to, because you want your party, if you put carvings on the wall, that they can decipher, right? You want them to decipher it. You want them to read it, and you want them to. I think, if I'm putting stuff out there, I generally want people the players, I don't have to be interested in it. Sure. So if I just put all kinds of stuff and it's in all these tales and things, but none of those tales really amount to much. Like, here's this item, and what's the item has all about this stuff, but it doesn't really matter. Unfortunately, I think what can end up happening is that the players just end up tuning that stuff out, right? You need to you want to make sure that that they can count on the stuff that they're getting being kind of if not that everything has to be absolutely on point, but like you want it to be, the information be useful in some way, because if it's not useful in some way, then they have to decipher what ends up being useful and what's not. And if there's enough stuff in there that's you throw on, you confuse things enough, you make the tapestry too busy. They stop caring because there's just too much. Like I don't know, I can't keep track of it, kind of thing, or like we don't know what's important, we don't know what's helpful and what's not, and so you get burned on picking the wrong information to hold on to. They just, again, you kind of stop. Brian says you got to. You gain a relevant spell or something. Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, yes. I guess though, yeah, everyone's different, right? I'm fine. I'm fine for that a bit. And that's definitely one way if you want to mechanize it, like, yeah, you get the stuff and you'll uncover a magic item. Like, yeah, that's cool. I think I'd like to. I think I'd prefer that. I don't know. I think it's fine. What I sort of lean into more is that knowing stuff. Well, hopefully, if I'm doing things the way I want to do them, that picking up all this stuff becomes useful in dealing with the world. Tell you something about the world. Tell you something about the people. So, for example, let me think about it. That, okay, there are some carvings in here, or let's say there are carvings here, and these carvings tell a story maybe or something, and that story, maybe it pertains to one of these habitations down here. So then maybe if you get this information and you bring it back here, or here somewhere, then it gives you could potentially leverage it. Not to say that you will, but you can leverage it, or it helps you find something else. And maybe there's items and magic and spells and stuff on the end of it. That's totally, fine. And if you want to play a game that really, like, that's the game, if you have Monster Hunter, the game, which is all about cutting things open and stealing, you could have kind of like Indiana Jones, the game, and it's all about deciphering things and finding items and doing that, and then the rewards tied directly in that, that works. That works too. I usually like to try to have the items, just be somewhere. I don't know. I like to kind of have the information be almost a currency to use with things, as opposed to directly lead to a reward. I mean, of course, there's gonna be exceptions all over the place, but as a general thing. But that's me. So makes it still kind of important, but and I'm always wary of, like, you don't want it to just be about. I mean, hopefully, your people are playing the game to play the game, right, and not playing it to, not playing it just to level up. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. Brian says their guys usually track items better than world info. Both are valuable though, for sure. Yeah. I think that's if you can get folks into the habit of tracking info. But I also play in a lot of games that there's a lot of politicking. And so it's going to be kind of game dependent too. A lot of the games that I like to play and kind of run, there's a heavy sort of political thing. So information is power. If you know stuff about people, their secrets, or whatever, then, or you can flatter them with things, or you can, like, that's strong stuff. In another game, it's not going to be meaningful at all. So it ends up coming down to what kind of game you play. So I like those games where it's like, if I found, like, this his great grandfather put up this, this guy, whatever, over here, their great grandfather put up this monument. And I I can use that leverage, right? Maybe I'm trying to get their help to deal with something over here, and I can all of a sudden spring out like, oh ho, like as your great grandfather put up this thing and showed that they did whatever. I ask you, sir, to follow in their footsteps and unpledge yourself to this, to the cause of our time, that kind of thing. Or, well, we found some signet ring buried by the monument. Now we can, if we go and take this and present it to that lord down here, that guy, well, that's some major brownie points because it's his great grandfather, and maybe that signet ring was lost, or it's super famous, or whatever. I dig that stuff. But sometimes it is also nice just to find something, Nothing is 100%. Got to mix it up. Okay, so we got a monument. So 5-4. What are my notes again? 5-4. Grass, power, death, admiration. Yeah, so it's a monument to the quiet death, meaning, and I think it makes sense. My idea was that you had this kind of ravine area that basically here in the hex map, you can't tell, but these, like, if you were going to look at more of a geographically accurate map, there'd be some kind of ravine, and then at least these two things would be basically on the edge, close to the edge of the ravine. Like, this is not miles away. Well, granted, this is only 3 miles anyway from center to center. But anyway, it's pretty close. So, it would be maybe here, and then you kind of come down and pop out here. And, oh, look, there's like this. I'm thinking that at the top of the ravine, there's some kind of monument that, again, you're sort of looking down on the lake. So I guess that we can start there. I'm not sure what kind of monument. Atop let's see, looking down at the Gloomwater from the southern tip of the gorge, a cyclopean stone plinth. Is that not how you spell plinth? Did I spell it wrong? Yes, I did. No, for some reason I thought that was a Y, and it's just an I-Y. Not an I-Y, but a Y-Y. Guy. What's going on my phone's bugging me, so let me check. Nothing's on fire. Okay, good. Don't want anything to be on fire. A Lover's Leap monument to lost Lenore. Oh, you're getting very Poe-ish. Nevermore, nevermore. Let's see. Looking out of the Gloomwater from the southern tip of the gorge, a cyclopean stone plinth. That's upward towards the sky. Sure. So this is definitely, what's the power here? So this is where, to Brian's thing about spells, this is where I think you can maybe do something to gain. Hey, Dice Tales, or my darling Clementine. So here's where I think with the power, for me anyway, that power keyword, we might be looking at. I could definitely see looking at, okay, maybe you get a spell like effect. So all right, something that was just neat. I don't know if I could use this, but it was kind of a cool, what's the word I'm looking for? Find, I guess. So I went, my daughter had a field trip to a cemetery, a famous cemetery in Brooklyn last week. It was last Friday, I guess. And I was one of the chaperones. So I went on the field trip. And this cemetery, it's not, I mean, even by American standards, it's not ridiculously old. It was founded in 1832. I think it's called Greenwood Cemetery. It's definitely famous in New York City. I think it's might have some renown elsewhere. I'm not sure, but definitely famous in New York City. Greenwood Cemetery, I think Walt Whitman, I think, is buried there. There's some other somewhat famous folks, or I mean, somewhat. There are some other folks famous in industry and whatever who are buried there. It was, according to our guide, it was the first rural. I'm gonna have to explain this in a minute. Rural cemetery, in that it was built at the time it was built. So now, if you look at Greenwood, and if you look it up on a map, if you Google map Greenwood, which I suppose I could do. No, I should say M. What happened to maps? I thought I was maps. Yeah. So if you, yeah, see, all right, New York, it is, it feels like it's smack dab in the center. Staten Island's here, Manhattan's here, Brooklyn and Queens and Long Island kind of stretches out that way. It's right in the middle of town now. But when this was built, 1832, this was decidedly not in town. This was farmland and other things. And so, according to our guide, if he is to be believed, this was the first rural cemetery. What that means, what they mean by rural cemetery is that it was built outside of the kind of town center. It was not built, and I didn't know this. Actually, I only learned this recently when I was watching Slow Horses, which is an awesome TV show on Apple TV. But a cemetery and a graveyard, they're technically not synonyms. A cemetery is when you have graves that are not attached to a church or presumably some other kind of religious building, whereas a graveyard is specifically for when you have folks that are interments that are next to or attached to a religious structure. So it's not a graveyard, it's a cemetery. And this cemetery, when it was built basically outside, or out in the, not in town, not in the middle of things, but out in the kind of out in the boonies, out just outside. It's out in the, I keep saying outside. Yes, of course it's outside of the town limits. The people who are buried here were not local to where it was. It was made here for people who are in, New York or, even Brooklyn, which at some points was kind of maybe, I think, more over here. And then, New York, which is, Manhattan, more over there. And I guess they hadn't done that before, where you'd actually take kind of a trip out of town to go to this cemetery. Of course, it's just, how things change from 1832 to now suddenly. But it was the first one. But anyway, one of the neat things in here, I mean, of course, it's a tragic kind of tale, but there's a monument in here to the little drummer boy. I think I posted this to my Instagram because I just thought it was poignant. But so the first person from Brooklyn to be killed in the Civil War was a drummer boy. And the drummer boy was not killed in the line of duty. In other words, what drummer boys did was they were young, kind of preteen kids, I guess boys. I don't know if I imagine at that time girls were not allowed to do this. And, good for them, because who wants to do this, is to drum, to set the beat for the army marching. So you'd have these boys doing whatever, right, to help. So you'd have these drummer boys. And the first person from Brooklyn to die in the Civil War was a drummer boy who did not die in the line of duty, but died to a gun accident, I guess at some camp somewhere where someone, I mean, it's a tale as old as guns, right? Somebody had a gun. They thought it was unloaded. It wasn't unloaded, and shot and killed the boy. But that's not even the thing. I mean, that's kind of sad. And it just, well, like, I remember saw the plaque and heard the story. I was like, man, that's like, come on. Like, really? You've got that's how this poor kid goes. That's our first casualty in the war, was from an accident like that. In any event, the getting over the sad sad part of it, the sort of interesting thing is they had a monument there, an original monument, and then maybe from the 18th, this is already from the Civil War time, and then I guess in 1870 something, they made I think it was made out of zinc. I think they said it was a zinc monument. So and I think the guy said that it was carved, it's whatever it's, I guess carved, it had to be carved out of pure zinc. And that thing looks like it's new. I mean, when you look at it, and I have pictures on my phone. I don't know how to get it. I don't think I know how to get it from my phone so I'll post it later if I can remember. But what's just crazy about it is it looked like it was, I would have thought, I mean, you look at it because you see and the thing is that's striking about it is in this little area where it's got some Civil War burials, and a lot of those, they replace the stones. So I guess the Department for Veterans Affairs will come and put in new markers when the old gravestones, which I asked the guy what happens to them, and besides just wearing away, a lot of times they just sink into the ground. So they will replace them. But you can still see some of the original ones, which are really worn, and they look really old. And then you see these newer ones that just look new. And then you see this Drummer Boy monument, and it looks really new. And you go, I was like, whoa, like when did they put that thing up? It looks like they could have put up last week. Maybe they put it up 10, 15, 20 years ago. But I mean, it looks like just new, like, whoa. And the guy's like, no, that was put up in like 1870, which not super old, but still you would have thought it would have looked closer to the original gravestones than something that looks like someone just knocked it, machine shopped it or whatever. Now, and I guess it's because of the zinc, and I didn't look up zinc yet, but I guess zinc must be super hard and therefore, I guess, resistant to the kind of weathering that a lot of other stones. And granted, I'm sure that granted, some other different stones are weaker, whatever, more resistant, but just that the zinc being just like you would not have known. You could have looked at that thing, and I don't know at what point it'll start showing somewhere, how long it takes, how much weathering, whatever. I don't know, but it was like, wow, I would not have ever guessed in 100 years someone said like, hey, this is over 100 years old. Look at something that's 150 years old, and you look at that, and you would have said, no, you're lying. Or at least you would have thought they must have restored it, cleaned it, and it's like, nope, zinc. So it just made me think about what you could do with some different materials of things. I don't know how feasible it is to work in zinc or where you get enough. I have no idea what zinc is to work it, but it might be something to look at, or you could just look at other just materials. Like, oh, what happens if they'd carved this instead of out of, stone that we always think about? What if they carved it out of some other material? It could have some interesting effects instead of going with the worn away stuff. Brian says, what a job would be to be the one transporting people to the graveyard, wagon full of caskets, vampires, highwaymen. Yeah, I don't know how that worked. I don't know how that worked at all, but it certainly interesting thought. And Brian also says, what I got to do to get hooked up with a zinc tomb. Yeah, I don't know how much zinc costs. I wonder if they might have the little, there's probably a picture of the little Drummer Boy statue, right? Gotta be. Gotta be the picture. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if these really get it. It's this one, unfortunately, because I just saw it. It was just, man, it was just I guess there was a bright day, so it just looked bright. I'll have to get my picture because I don't know if those aren't really giving it justice, but it was a pretty neat effect. Okay. Let's see. Monument of Quiet Death. Looking down at the Gloomwater from the sun tip of the gorge, a cyclopean stone plant points up towards the sky. Let's see. carved into its sides are reliefs of figures reaching upwards. Reaching upwards. Besides an offering bowl in the ground. Dice Tales gives you something to think about. Nice. Let's see, a depression in the ground. So we have looking down at the Gloomwater from the southern tip of the gorge. Cyclopean stone points upwards towards the sky. Could probably just get rid of the towards the sky, right? We don't need that. Just points upwards. Carved into its sides are reliefs of figures reaching upwards. All right, I got upwards twice. Carved into its sides are reliefs of figures reaching upwards. A depression in the ground lined with stone. I'm trying to think about it because I'm thinking it's something. So what I'm thinking about is if I was going to draw this out, I'm not sure how to describe it. Would be that you have the, and I'm look as if we're looking down. So if this is the edge of the, oh, that's terrible. Whatever. This is the edge of the thing, and here's the stone. Okay, we're just gonna clock that. All right, that's your stone. That there's maybe something here, and I was thinking that there's a little channel. Kind of like that. I don't know. Something like that. And that you literally put something in here and then you kind of send it off. You gotta send something over it, and this, kind of like that. That's my thought. But I'm not sure how to describe that. Carbon says, okay, a depression in the ground lined with stone forms a bowl with a small channel, also stone lined, leading to leading over the edge of the ravine, leading to the edge of the gorge. I guess at the cliff. A cliffside. What is that? A cliffside turlet? I suppose you could crap it. Given that this is a place of power and death, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I would want to. I mean, I think that would be very funny. You could definitely have some fun if somebody decided to take liberties, but I think the idea is you have to sacrifice something, and maybe wine or something else you pour in there, and you send it off. Like you put something in, or I'm not exactly sure what the. Because I'm thinking if you put something in heavy, maybe you need to throw it off the cliff. Maybe you don't need the depression. Maybe you're just supposed to pour something off the edge of the cliff. I don't know. I was kind of thinking of it having something that's sort of obvious. Maybe something more obvious. I suppose, than... I mean, what kind of thing could we... Well, I guess, here's something fun. Maybe there's a particular flower or some other thing that you're supposed to put in here. Because, flowers... I was thinking about in the... What was it? In the... the first Christian Bale Batman movie. Was it not the Dark Knight? Batman Begins. He had to go and get some flower, and then he brings it up to the thing, and the flower. It was in the movie. I think it works really well because the flower. It's both something kind of symbolic, but it also is this thing that they are able to call back to in the movie because the first time, right? And then it makes, but the flower has that psychedelic, or that, I don't know, what is that? What kind of effect it would be? Psychotic, I guess. I was saying psychedelic. I don't know, maybe might that be too, but that kind of psychotic effect, and then that ends up being tied into the plot. So maybe there's some flower, something that they have to get from somewhere else, and you put it in there. And I was thinking wine or something else. Maybe you then send it off the edge, floating on some wine. So that, and then what that allows is then we can connect it to some other spot. And it doesn't have to be one of these. If none of these named things we've got fits, we can put it somewhere else. Maybe it just grows in these somewhere out here naturally, or maybe it grows around here. Maybe it's somewhere we got these two settlements here. Maybe it's somewhere, but it makes sense, I think, when you're getting something that's sort of powerful. When you're getting power, I always think about we can obviously think about, well, what effect are you getting and how much, but you want it to be. I think there's that element of by getting this stuff, you kind of prove yourself worthy for the thing. So if this site is going to give you some insight into death, whatever it be, or maybe we speak with dead or whatever, then the higher that power, we can look at sort of spell level as kind of a shortcut, or I don't know, just a quick way to think about power. Like, what level kind of spell effect is this? Then we can think of, well, how hard should it be to get that thing? So I kind of like that idea. There's some comments here. Dicetail says, is there a stream of water coming out of the stone that flows through the bowl and over the edge? No, I know there isn't. I was just thinking that that would be part of the thing, is you would get the petals, you would bring them and wine. And I think this is where we can, it could be water too. You could seed that in with, if there's whoever this divine person is, maybe, and I'm doing divine, but it doesn't have to be, because I think technically this could be kind of anything, but I think it's just death. So you might look at, like, what is we could maybe look at what is a liquid, that's maybe even look at, like, what liquids are associated with death. Could be another way to look at it. It could be water. We could do water too. Yeah, that, like, Dicetail says, maybe there's a poem. Could be this also, of course, could be where somebody nearby, because remember, we have settlements that are in the neighborhood. We got settlements right here, so this is here, this is here. So it could be that people here know something about it. Brian says, speak with dead kind of power, not too powerful. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm gonna have time to figure that out. So a supplicant speaking a ritual phrase while a supplicant can conduct a ritual in which they place petals of and I'll just put it in caps right now so it remembers me to kind of think of a certain flower in the stone bowl. stone bowl, and then flush them down, and then let's see, pour liquid to the bowl, sacrificing both to the Gloomwater, gains an effect. Effect TBD. Don't know yet. Dice Tales feels... No, I don't think so, Dice Tales. Only because, one, it's too easy. I don't want to... we are... it is a game, after all. I like the idea, and we can also put it in here. We can have some paths and trails. I like the idea that you have to go on this kind of... You have to go on a little bit of a quest. You want this thing, you want to go do it, right? You want this power, like you have to do something. And like I was kind of saying before, it's like we can look at, well, how we can, I think the sort of the amount of power, right? It should be kind of commensurate with the amount of power that you're getting from it. So we shouldn't send somebody around the world to get something that's the equivalent of a low level spell, because that's just kind of silly. We'll want to make it. One, I'd want it to be in this region. I don't want, and then two, I don't think this is supposed to be super powerful. I don't have written here what the power levels these are, but I don't think it's supposed to be crazy powerful or anything. So it should be kind of maybe a low to mid level one. We can also, obviously, the duration can be ones like, oh, it's like this kind of spell, but instead of lasting for, I don't know, an hour or 10 minutes or whatever, Speak with Dead, let's say it was Speak with Dead, but maybe Speak with Dead, I don't remember, only lasts for a little bit. What if this lasts longer? Keep in mind here too that given the effect of the Gloomwater itself, where you can see souls coming to drink, if you have some kind of Speak with Dead thing, and then you're able to get down here during a full moon, or if you can, then there's, the linkages. We have, I don't think these two would work together, because one, maybe these two maybe shouldn't work, because one's law and one's chaos. But I had this idea that that the lake's been messed with in some way. So I think I'm going to go with the fact that this used to be neutral or lawful, and it's been corrupted, and we could think about, well, how was this corrupted? So it'll definitely be something to do with death, and it's going to relate to this somehow. And maybe even there were some old posts here that you were actually supposed to, at some point, as like another test, you were supposed to rappel down as kind of a thing, so that you can see these old stone posts at the top of this gorge where you were supposed to rappel down. And of course, nobody does anymore, so there's no rope or anything there, but they used to be a thing. Like, we can think about what was the original. I think it's a cool thing about, like, what was the original thing? Like, they did this, you went on some kind of quest, you got the flowers, you poured it out here, and then you went down here to talk to your old elders. It was a way for the leaders of various things to get wisdom of the ages to do this. And it was also, as these things often are, you kind of have to go on these kind of quests. So you have to go here and do this and do that, and then you come back and do this. I think it works as sort of a ritual thing, and it can also be a fun adventure thing for the party to do. Dice Tale says, a rumor in the settlement that you can speak with the dead loved one by pouring wine and dropping a certain flower. And I might. Yeah, I mean, there's many ways. That part, it's kind of, there are a couple ways you can do it. One, you can have rumors in the village. Would be one. Though I might not have had, like, no one's probably talking about that in the village. It just doesn't make sense to, unless there's something going on where that would, and this would come up. So one of the things I was going to do a video on this, I still might, on the main channel, was this idea of you're setting up and I was probably I might wait till I'm kind of done with the stocking of this to do it, because it kind of pertains, is that you have this thing you've set up, and then you kind of, I think you need to throw a rock in here, like you need to set things in motion. And I was watching the show Paradise, and it was a great analogy that the person on Paradise made of what they were doing is they were throwing a rock in the pool, or maybe what? No, I also saw the movie Black Bag on the weekend too. On was it also on Friday? So maybe I don't remember. It was in Black Bag. In either case, this idea of throwing the rock in the pool to see what the ripples do, and so sure, when everything's just hunky dory, I just don't see guys in the tavern going, "Oh, I hear there's a rumor that you can speak to your dead loved ones." That doesn't really make no one's. To me, I'm like, no one's talking about that. They're probably talking about stuff that pertains more to what they're doing. Like, oh, the harvest sucks, or I saw a weird beast over there. But if something was happening, like the dead are climbing out of the gorge, or something else is horrible is happening, where like talking to the dead, or then suddenly that it might be a rumor. Like, oh my gosh, these things are happening. I heard that you might be able to talk to the dead if you can do this thing. Like, then it makes sense. It makes sense in the context of people when there's this thing going on, this calamity, or not calamity, that there's a conflict, that there's some sort of something's happening. Now suddenly that rumor makes sense. Whereas it doesn't make sense and just kind of, it's Tuesday. What do you got today, George? I don't know, Henry. I heard that it's like, yeah, you could jam it in there if you wanted to. But so I think the way I would lean towards doing it is it can just be there. And then if the party needs to talk to the dead and they start to research, so there may be something where it's like, oh, to put another, so here's maybe the way I would, a couple ways to do it. But the way I would want to figure it is that you end up in a situation like in the that Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves movie, right? Okay, something's happening, shenanigans, whatever. We need this Helm of Disjunction. Well, where is it? I don't know. The last time anybody saw it, it was at this battle. Everyone in that battle is dead. So no one knows where it is. And assuming that the party ends up in the same idea of like, well, we'll go there and talk to them. Now, in the movie's case, they had the spell. Oh, we'll use the spell, and that was fine. But if they didn't have the spell and they thought about, well, man, well, we don't, whatever, we don't have the spell, whatever, how are we going to do that? Then it might be like, okay, maybe we can find somebody who can speak with dead or do that. Maybe we can find it. And then someone can say, well, we don't know how to do that. But we heard in the time of our grandfathers that when they used to go speak to the dead by doing this thing. And that's kind of like how I would want to do it. Like, it's there, and there would be I would have other things pointing to it potentially, but I want to be kind of a way for the party, a resource for the party potentially to call upon if they need it, as opposed to something that, because they don't need to. I mean, this is like, at this point in this kind of hex crawl, this isn't something that they need. It's something they can walk up upon and go, I wonder what this is. And then that's another way they could do it, would be they find the monument, it's interesting to them, and they go back to town and start asking about it, in which case they'll say like, oh yeah, back in the day they used to do this thing over there, but we haven't done that in a long time, or the secret was lost, or whatever. Like, that's another way, right? You discover it, and then they go and ask questions about it. And maybe those questions lead them, or there's some kind of, it becomes a piece to a puzzle. And I think in terms of, setting up an adventure, if I was going to make an adventure to hand out to people, if I had an adventure, presumably here might be about the dead or undead or something to do with the dead, then it makes sense that I would want to have things pointing to it. But I don't know if I would just have like a rumor. I would have it as, you can find, there are clues to find about it, or you could find it and ask questions about it, or something like that. Because I feel like, especially if you're just playing in kind of a hex crawl, not everything has to be immediately working, and then, but you as the GM, you kind of know it in the back of your brain that it's there. So when someone asks you, well, how could we possibly do that? Someone can say like, oh, I heard there's this monument that you can go. Dice still says the dead climbing out of the gorge sounds epic. Yeah, I watched that. I guess I won't I won't spoil it, but there's a movie that's fairly recent that has a similar concept with the gorge and things coming out of it, or potential for them to come out of it. So yeah, it is fun. The movie's not particularly great, but the concept is kind of fun, and I could see turning that into a an RPG, or like an adventure concept. So yeah, something going on. The waters are bubbling, and now dead are coming out. Yeah, that could be cool. Maybe that could be something. That could be either the beginning of something or the end of something. Um, you know. So we got that. All right. Well, we got the monuments. I've got. So let's see. We now have this monument to quiet death. We don't know what the spell effect will be. And remember, we don't have to figure this out all right now. Like, we could get everything, and I could leave these things blank, or I just need to remember to fill them in. And then we could see what other stuff we come up with, keeping these things in mind. And maybe one of these other spots will be like, oh yeah, it makes sense that there's maybe in one of these desert spots, there's a little oasis that has it in here. And this was part of the ritual of leadership, is that you went, you did these nights in the desert, you got this thing, and then you came back and then did the monument, and then you went down to the lake. Like, that could totally have been the path of kings, or this is what we used to have some people called the soul speakers. This is what they would do, right? Totally cool ritual thing. And I would say, back to Brian's point, not sure if he's still here, but Brian's thing about giving off a power or like a spell or something like that would totally be if a party member wanted to go and do that. Like, they find these pieces and they hear the story of, oh yeah, these people could do something, but this is what they had to do, that they would have an initiate, and the initiate would have to spend X amount of days in the desert and then find the oasis and then pull this flower and then crush it and do something and blow it, and okay, and then climb right. Then it's like, all right, if you go and you do all that stuff, then yeah, I will be totally happy to give you some soul speaking power, maybe a permanent speak with dead, or maybe whatever it is. Like, that would be very cool. Now, if you're doing something like Wolves on the Coast, then you could maybe use one of those boasts to say, I will do that kind of thing. I will not come back until I have undergone the quest of the soul speaker. Yada, yada, yada. All right, folks. Thanks for hanging out. I always say this and I never do it. There's a chance I might come on and stream later today. I'm by myself at Studio Base, so I might come back on later on, do some more noodling around. If I do, you will be the first to know. Beyond that, I will talk with everyone later. Have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody. And I will talk to you later. Bye now.